The first scream didn't come from a mouth. It came from a plastic lunchbox, pink, cracked, and sliding across the marble lobby floor of Bennett Global like a wounded creature. The sound echoed through the high ceilings with a sharp, humiliating skid. The billionaire, Adrian Hale, froze mid-stride. His security chief was speaking, but the voice faded into nothing, because behind that lunchbox was a child. Small, trembling, fists balled so tightly her knuckles were white. And then she sobbed a sentence that cut through his world like a blade. "They threw my lunch away again." The words hit him harder than any boardroom ambush, harder than any betrayal he'd suffered in 37 years of breathing. Something inside him, something he thought had died long ago, twitched. The little girl sucked in a shaky breath, trying to stop her tears, trying to be brave, trying not to fall apart on a floor far shinier than anything she had ever walked on. His chest tightened painfully. He hadn't felt that in years. Not since him. Not since then. Before we continue, take a moment to hit that subscribe button and let us know where you're watching from. We love seeing how far our stories travel. And trust me, this one will make you think twice, because it could happen to anyone. The lobby cameras flashed from the media outside. Reporters shouted his name, but he didn't hear a single syllable. The world blurred, like someone had shoved him underwater. All he could see was that child's small frame, her braids undone at the ends, her backpack so thin it sagged like a deflated balloon. She wasn't supposed to be here. Children didn't wander into the fortress of Bennett Global. His building was a tower of glass and ice, polished for investors, guarded by metal detectors, designed for billion-dollar deals, not tears. Yet here she was, and he couldn't look away. A confused employee tried to usher her aside. "Sweetheart, this is a private..." Adrian's voice cut clean through the air. "Stop!" Everyone froze. He felt their eyes darting toward him, waiting for the legendary temper, the clipped command, the cold dismissal he was famous for. The Adrian Hale who ruled markets, crushed mergers, and slept 4 hours a night, never wasted a second on anything emotional. But that version of him was nowhere to be found. Not when the child lifted her face. Her eyes, dark, stunned, wet, met his, and something in him fractured. The inciting incident began here, quietly, unexpectedly, with a child who had no idea she was crashing into a man's life precisely at the moment his heart was weakest. Just 30 minutes earlier, Adrian had been in the penthouse boardroom holding the final medical bills in his palm. His brother's handwriting was still scrawled across the envelope. "For when you're ready to forgive me." He never would be. Not fully. Not after what happened. Not after losing everything that had mattered. The guilt still lived inside him like a parasite. He shoved the memory down now, hard, but it left a raw burn in his chest. He hadn't slept. He hadn't eaten. For months he'd survived on caffeine, on fury, on the cold machinery of success. He was a billionaire built on bone-deep exhaustion, a man made of regret, a man who pretended not to feel anything at all. Yet one small girl's sob had torn through all his armor. He stepped closer. Her breath hitched, as though she expected him to yell. His suit alone probably cost more than her entire school's cafeteria budget. She stood straighter, bracing, as if she'd been punished for less before. That made something burn hot behind his ribs. He knelt. A billionaire. Kneeling. The entire lobby held its breath. "What happened to your lunch?" he asked softly. Her small fingers twisted the frayed strap of her backpack. They said I wasn't allowed to sit there. The big kids. They threw it on the ground, then stepped on it." Her voice cracked. The pink lunchbox on the marble floor looked crushed, like someone had stamped on it until the lid bent inward. A smear of something, yogurt, rice, spread across the expensive tile. He swallowed. Not at the mess, at the realization that this little girl was used to cleaning herself up, used to swallowing things, used to shrinking. "Where is your mother?" he asked. Something flickered through her gaze. Fear, perhaps, or sadness so old it didn't belong to someone so young. "She's working." "And your father?" She hesitated. "He's not." His throat tightened again. His security chief stepped forward. "Sir, we should escort her outside. Media can wait." The chief blinked, stunned. Adrian Hale never said that, but he wasn't thinking about the stock market, or the cameras, or the meeting he was supposed to be leading in less than 3 minutes. He was thinking about a different child, a different voice, a different moment when he'd failed to protect someone who needed him. A ghost tugged at the back of his mind. He forced himself to breathe. "What's your name?" he asked. She whispered it, almost inaudible. "Maya." "How old are you?" 9. She tried to wipe her tears away, embarrassed to be crying in front of a man who practically owned half the city. Her small hand shook. "I didn't mean to come here," she whispered. I just wanted somewhere safe to sit." That word, safe, hit him harder than anything else she had said. His entire building was engineered for control, for power, for intimidation. It was not designed to be safe. Not emotionally, not for anyone, and certainly not for a little girl with a crushed lunch and too much fear in her eyes. Yet she had run here, to him, as if she'd known. As if the universe had decided to shove her straight into his path at the exact moment he needed to be confronted by something real, something fragile, something human. His pulse thudded painfully as he rose and extended a hand toward her. "Come with me, Maya." She tensed. Not out of distrust, but out of disbelief, as though she didn't understand why someone like him would speak gently, why someone like him would care. Her hesitation sliced him open. He softened his voice further. "It's all right. I won't let anyone hurt you here." Something shifted in her posture. A tiny, trembling nod. She placed her hand in his. Her palm was small, cold and thin, so thin it made his jaw clench. When was the last time she'd had a proper meal? Why was a 9-year-old alone in the street? And what kind of school allowed children to be bullied so viciously? His heart pounded with a strange, unfamiliar protectiveness. He led her past the frozen onlookers, past the stunned executives, past the glass escalators reflecting their figures like a surreal painting. He knew exactly where to take her. His private executive kitchen. No reporters, no employees, no cameras. Just quiet, and warmth, and food. The moment they entered the penthouse-level suite, Maya's breath caught. She stared at the wall of floor-to-ceiling windows, at the city sprawling below like a glittering sea. Adrian felt her awe like a twist in his chest. Children should be amazed by the world, not terrified of it. He pulled out a leather stool for her. She climbed up carefully, as though afraid she'd break something expensive. He opened the industrial refrigerator, stocked with untouched organic produce, catered meals he never had time to eat, and pastries he pretended he didn't like, but secretly devoured on sleepless nights. She watched him like he was performing magic. "You can have anything you want," he said quietly. "Just tell me." Her eyes darted nervously. "I don't want to take something that costs too much." His entire body tensed. How many times had she been told she was a burden? How many times had the world taught her to apologize for existing? He kept his tone steady. "You're not taking anything. I'm offering it." She blinked, absorbing that. Can I have a sandwich?" she whispered. "Just a small one, if that's okay." A billionaire's throat nearly closed. He made her 3. Turkey, ham, and cheese, cut diagonally, arranged neatly, with grapes on the side. He added juice, not soda. Then he hesitated and placed a warm chocolate chip cookie on the plate. When he set it in front of her, Maya stared at the food like she might cry again. But she didn't. She ate. Fast at first, then slower, then with tiny sighs that told him more about her life than anything she'd said aloud. He sat across from her, watching her small shoulders relax for the first time, watching her stomach finally settle, watching a child feel safe, even if only for a moment. And he wondered why it hurt so damn much. She finished her last bite and wiped her mouth with the back of her hand. He handed her a napkin. She blinked, surprised again by even that small kindness. "Thank you," she whispered. He swallowed. "You don't have to thank me," he murmured. "No one ever makes me food like this." He froze. "Not even your mother?" "She works 2 jobs. She's tired." Maya frowned, thinking. "I think she'd make me nice things if she had time, but I don't want to be trouble." There it was again. That quiet resignation. That learned self-erasure. His chest tightened painfully. He remembered another child, small, lonely, waiting for someone who never came home. He forced the memory down. But it clung. It always did. "Who are the kids who threw out your lunch?" he asked. "Older students?" She nodded. "They said I can't sit at the tables because I look poor." Anger flared in him, raw, dark, dangerous. He gripped the edge of the counter until his knuckles whitened. Children could be cruel, yes, but adults let cruelty grow. Someone at her school wasn't doing their job. Someone wasn't protecting her. Someone was letting a 9-year-old be humiliated during the most vulnerable part of her day. He exhaled slowly. "Has this happened more than once?" Her silence was answer enough. "How many times, Maya?" She looked down. 7. His breath left him in a slow, heavy exhale. This wasn't an accident. This was a pattern, a system failure. And for reasons he couldn't yet explain, he felt responsible. Violently, irrationally responsible. As though the universe had handed him this child and dared him to look away. He couldn't. Not again. A knock at the door jolted them both. His assistant's voice trembled on the other side. "Sir, CPS is downstairs." His blood turned to ice. Maya's entire body stiffened. "Why?" Adrian asked sharply. They received an anonymous report. "About a child wandering alone on corporate property. They want to speak with her." He saw Maya shrink in her seat, fear rippling through her like a shockwave. She whispered so quietly he almost didn't hear. "Please, don't let them take me." The words hit him like a blow. CPS, investigations, system pressure, papers, interviews, possible removal. His heart thundered, hammered, roared in his chest. He wasn't prepared for this. He hadn't expected to care this much. He didn't even understand why he cared this much. But he knew one thing with absolute clarity. He was not letting this child go through whatever she had been through. Alone. He stood, towering, protective, something fierce awakening inside him. "Stay behind me, Maya," he said quietly. Her small hand slipped into his again, and for the first time in years, something inside Adrian Hale, billionaire, loner, cynic, felt undeniably alive. He walked toward the door, toward the confrontation, toward the storm he knew was coming, and toward a future he could feel shifting beneath his feet. Just as he grabbed the handle, Maya whispered, "Will you stay with me?" His throat tightened so hard it hurt. "Yes," he said, and he meant it more than anything he'd ever said in his life. The handle felt colder than it should have, smooth steel, firm, unyielding. Adrian gripped it tightly, steadying himself, as if the metal could anchor him when everything inside felt abruptly unstable. Behind him, Maya hovered close, so close he could feel the faint warmth of her small body radiating through his suit jacket. Her breath was shallow with fear. The air around them vibrated with tension, anticipation thick enough to choke on. He exhaled once, quiet, controlled. Then he opened the door. The hallway outside was lined with polished wood and recessed lighting, designed to impress, to intimidate, to remind visitors they were standing in the very heart of a corporate empire. Yet the two strangers standing in that hallway looked utterly unmoved by luxury. Two CPS agents, clipboards, neutral expressions, predators camouflaged as bureaucracy. Adrian's pulse thudded hard, a quiet thunder beneath his ribs. The older agent, a woman with glasses perched at the very tip of her nose, offered a stiff, professional nod. "Mr. Hale, thank you for letting us up. We received a report of a minor on restricted corporate grounds without a guardian present." His jaw tightened. Report. Anonymous. Already filed. Meaning someone downstairs had acted quickly. Too quickly. Maybe a guard who didn't want liability. Maybe a bystander who assumed danger. Maybe an employee who didn't understand what they'd seen. Whatever the reason, the system had now been activated. And once systems like CPS began to move, they did not stop easily. He stepped forward, blocking their view of Maya without seeming obvious. "She's safe with me," he said, voice calm but weighted. She wasn't wandering. She was being bullied and came here for protection. The younger agent lifted a brow. "She came here specifically?" "Yes." "How did she know this was a safe place?" "She didn't," Adrian replied. "She ran. Fear takes you anywhere with walls and people." Behind him, he felt Maya shrink even smaller, her small fingers curling nervously into the back of his jacket as though holding on to him was her only tether to the world. Something hot and unsteady twisted in his chest. The older agent cleared her throat. "We'll need to speak with the child. Alone." "No." The word roared through him, silent but volcanic. "She's frightened," he said evenly. "She won't talk alone." "It's procedure," the woman replied. "We are legally required." Adrian stepped into the small space between them, so subtly it could have been mistaken for coincidence. "And I am legally responsible for the safety of every minor on my premises at this moment," he countered quietly. "She stays with me." The two agents exchanged a glance, annoyed, calculating. He knew that look well. He'd seen it in lawyers who thought they could outmaneuver him, in executives who underestimated him, in the mirror years ago when he'd grown too arrogant to see consequences. But this wasn't arrogance. This was protection. Raw, instinctive protection he didn't entirely understand yet. The younger agent tried again. "Sir, interfering with a CPS inquiry." Adrian's voice lowered. "I'm not interfering. I'm staying with her." A long pause. A silent tug of war. Finally, the older agent relented. "You may be present, but you must not coach answers." "She's 9, he replied coldly. "I won't let anyone intimidate her." The agents stepped inside. Maya slipped closer to him, barely breathing, as though their presence alone drained oxygen from the room. Adrian placed a hand lightly on the back of her chair, the only gesture he allowed himself to let her know she wasn't alone. She sat slowly, her little legs dangling off the edge, sneakers failing to touch the floor. The older agent crouched to her eye level. "Maya," she said gently, "can you tell us why you're here today?" Maya's voice came out small. They threw my lunch away." "Who are they?" "My classmates." Her hands fidgeted. The big kids. And why did they throw it away? Her lips trembled. Because they said I looked poor. Adrian's breath caught. Not in surprise. He already knew. But hearing it again, hearing the humiliation in her tiny voice, ripped something inside him open further. He moved closer instinctively, a shadow of protection stretching over her. The younger agent scribbled a note. And where were the supervising adults when this happened? I don't know, she whispered. They weren't looking. The older agent looked up at Adrian. And how did she arrive at your building? I was walking, Maya said quickly, before he could answer. I just walked. I didn't want to go home yet. Mom's working, and the streets scared me. So I came here. It's tall. I thought people in a tall place might help. Her voice cracked. That was all it took. Adrian felt a sharp, devastating pull behind his sternum. He inhaled unsteadily. The older agent's expression softened despite herself, but the younger one's eyes narrowed. Suspicious. Where do you live, Maya? He asked. Her head dropped. I don't want to say. Why not? The younger agent pressed. Because then you'll go there, she whispered. And if you go and Mom's not home... Her throat tightened, and she looked up, panicked. They'll take me away. And there it was, the fear beneath everything, the shape of her world, the secret she had been carrying in her small, exhausted chest. Not fear of bullies, not fear of poverty, but fear of being separated from the only parent she had left. Adrian felt the impact of that realization like a physical hit. His mind flashed, unbidden, uncontrollable, to a hospital room, a white sheet, a hand slipping from his, a promise broken before it could be spoken. He swallowed hard. The older agent sighed, softening further. Maya, we're not here to take you away. We just want to make sure you're safe. Her eyes glistened. I am safe. With him. The agent's heads snapped toward Adrian. He kept his expression calm, though inside, it felt like someone had just reached in and gripped his heart with both hands. The younger agent adjusted his glasses. Mr. Hale, you are not a legal guardian. Any assertion that she is safe with you places you in a position of implied responsibility that... I understand responsibility, Adrian said sharply, more sharply than intended. Better than most. And right now, her safety is not theoretical. She was bullied, alone, and terrified enough to run into a skyscraper she didn't even know the owner of. He paused, controlled the tremor in his breath. She didn't choose me, she chose safety, and she found it here. And as long as she's on my property, I'm accountable for her. The younger agent stiffened. The older agent exhaled. Mr. Hale, we will need to visit the home. Standard protocol. But we have no grounds for emergency removal at this moment. Maya sagged, relief and fear mixing like storm clouds. The younger agent added, however, we do need to inform her mother. Immediately. I'll escort Maya to her, Adrian said before thinking. Personally. The older agent blinked. That isn't necessary. It is. It was more than necessary. It felt inevitable. The younger agent lifted a brow. Mr. Hale, are you certain you want to be involved at this level? He met the man's gaze, holding it. Steady, unblinking. I am. There was no hesitation, no ambiguity. Even though he didn't fully understand why this child's safety mattered so deeply to him, he knew, instinctively, absolutely, that he could not walk away now. The older agent nodded reluctantly. Very well, we'll follow. The agents turned toward the door. Adrian bent down to Maya's level. She looked up at him with wide, frightened eyes. "Are you ready?" he asked quietly. She nodded, but tears brimmed. What if Mom is mad? That question broke him in a strange, silent way. He softened, voice low. "I'll be right there with you. I promise." Her small hand slid into his again. And something inside him, something that had been dormant, dusty, untouched since the day he lost everything, stirred awake. The ride down the elevator felt endless. The CPS agents stood silently behind them, clipboards ready, protocol buzzing beneath their skin. Maya clung to the side of Adrian's coat. He inhaled deeply, feeling himself pulled into memories he had shoved into locked vaults. He knew fear. He knew loss. He knew what it meant to be a child expecting the worst when an adult said, "We need to talk." He also knew what it was to fail someone you were meant to protect. As the elevator descended, his chest tightened with a familiar ache, one he had spent years covering with wealth, control, power. But money didn't fix the past. It couldn't change the hospital room, the beeping monitors, the promise he didn't keep. He was not thinking about business anymore. He was thinking about a 9-year-old girl gripping his jacket like a lifeline. He was thinking about second chances. He was thinking about redemption. He was thinking about how strange it was that the universe had chosen today, when he was weakest, to place this child in his path. The elevator dinged. The doors slid open. And the world outside erupted. Reporters, cameras, flashing lights, security barriers lined with people shouting his name, phones lifted like weapons, microphones thrust forward. He felt Maya freeze. Her grip tightened frantically. He reacted instantly, instinctively. He turned his body toward her, shielding her from the cameras with the full breadth of his frame. "Stay behind me," he murmured. "You're safe." Flash, flash, flash. The media roared. "Mr. Hale, who's the child? Is she yours? Is CPS investigating you? Are you fostering a minor? Is this related to the lawsuit?" Chaos burst around them like a firestorm. CPS agents stiffened, realizing this was no ordinary case. Security rushed in, creating a human wall around them, but the photographers kept screaming, capturing every terrified look on the child's face, each one a weapon that would be online in seconds. Adrian's blood ran molten hot. A new kind of fury took shape inside him. Not the cold, calculated anger he used in boardrooms, but something primal, protective. Fiercer than anything he'd felt in years. He lowered his voice to Maya. "Don't look at them." "I'm scared," she whispered. "I know," he said. "Hold on." He adjusted his stance, angling her completely out of view. His arm created a barrier, his shoulder blocking exposed angles, his body forming a shield that no camera could see past. For a moment, despite all the chaos, the world narrowed to just her. Her trembling breath, her fingers locked around his wrist, her small body pressed close, seeking safety she had never been given. He swallowed. "You're doing great," he murmured. "Just breathe with me." He felt her try, small inhalations mimicking his deeper ones. The CPS agents signaled security to clear a path. Adrian moved with deliberate calm, though adrenaline burned through every nerve ending. Cameras kept flashing. "Mr. Hale, who is she to you? Why involve CPS? Is this a custody scandal? Are you adopting her? Does she belong to an employee?" He gritted his teeth. They didn't care about truth. They cared about headlines, about spectacle, about tearing apart vulnerable people for views. He felt sick. He tightened his protective stance even more. When they reached the armored company SUV waiting at the curb, he opened the door and helped Maya inside first. Only when she was seated safely did he enter behind her. The door slammed shut. The noise cut off abruptly. Silence. just the sound of Mia's shaky breathing beside him. She whispered, "Did I do something wrong?" He closed his eyes. "No," he said softly. "You did everything right." Her small shoulders sagged with relief. He felt his heartbeat hitch. Then the CPS agent in the passenger seat cleared her throat. "Mr. Hale, we need her home address." Maya tensed again. Adrian placed a steadying hand near her, not touching, just anchoring her with presence. "It's okay," he murmured. "I'm going with you." She nodded slowly, then whispered her address. An apartment complex in the Lower East District, one of the poorest zones in the city. The engine started. The SUV pulled away. As the skyline of Bennett Global receded in the rear window, Adrian watched the child beside him. He didn't know what waited at her home. He didn't know what CPS would find. He didn't know why this mattered so fiercely. But one truth settled into him with crushing clarity. Whatever storm they were driving into, he would not let her face it alone. Not this time. Not any time. Not again. The city changed as the SUV moved east. Glass buildings shrank, sidewalks cracked, street lamps thinned out, flickering one by one like dying fireflies. Adrian watched it all in silence, the tension coiling in his chest, tightening with every block. It had been years since he'd driven through the Lower East District. Not since he'd built a foundation here. Not since he learned the truth about what money fixed, and what it never could. "Turn here," Maya whispered beside him, her voice barely above breath. She pointed toward a narrow road lined with leaning buildings and graffiti-painted brick. The CPS agents exchanged a look. The SUV slowed. Maya pressed her forehead to the window. Not excited, not relieved, simply bracing. That bracing twisted something brutal inside Adrian. He leaned closer. "Is this where you live?" She nodded. A faint shame flickered across her face when she saw how run down the street was. He felt anger flare. Not at her, never at her, but at a world where a 9-year-old thought she had to apologize for poverty. The SUV stopped in front of a weathered 3-story apartment building. The front stair railings leaned outward, the paint peeled in long strips. The entry light blinked like a warning sign. "This one," she whispered. "Apartment 2B." The CPS agents stepped out. Adrian followed immediately, ignoring security's attempt to flank him. The moment Maya's shoes touched pavement, her hand found his coat again. He didn't shake her off. He didn't even try. The building smelled of damp wood and old pipes. The hallway hummed with the uneven buzz of fluorescent bulbs. Somewhere above them, a baby cried. A dog barked once, then again, in sharp, restless barks. Maya hesitated at the bottom of the stairs. "Is your mother home right now?" the older CPS agent asked. "Maybe," Maya whispered. "She works cleaning offices. Sometimes she gets home early, sometimes late." Adrian felt her small fingers tighten. Together they climbed the staircase. The railing wobbled beneath his hand. The paint along the wall was stained with something he didn't want to identify. He had walked through penthouse marble halls hours earlier, but somehow this narrow stairwell felt heavier, as if gravity itself had doubled. They reached the second floor. Maya stood in front of apartment 2B. The door was old wood, chipped at the bottom, the number 2 hanging sideways on a rusted nail. Her breathing hitched. I don't want Mom to get in trouble." "You won't," Adrian murmured. "And she won't either." "You promise?" Her eyes, too old for 9, searched his face like the truth lived only there. He inhaled. "I promise," he said, and felt the weight of that promise settle like a vow. The older agent knocked. Nothing. Knocked again. Still nothing. The younger agent sighed. "We'll need to report this as an unattended minor." The lock clicked. The door opened just enough for a woman's face to appear. Tired, startled, confusion etched into every line. "Maya?" she breathed, stepping back. "Baby, what are you doing with—" Her gaze lifted and froze on Adrian. Shock, fear, embarrassment. All of it flashed across her eyes in one frantic second before she shoved the door fully open. "Oh God! Oh God, sir! I'm so sorry!" she stammered, voice cracking as she rushed to pull Mia close. "Please, please! She didn't trespass. She didn't mean, she never wanders, I swear." Her hands flew over her daughter's shoulders, checking, smoothing, trembling so visibly it twisted something deep in Adrian's chest. Maya clung to her mother's waist. "Mom, I'm okay, I promise." "No," her mother whispered, panic rising. "You're with CPS. Why are CPS here? Why are you with—" Her gaze landed on Adrian again. "Please tell me she didn't get into trouble at your building. Please tell me I'm not losing my job. Please." Her voice broke. It was the sound of a woman pushed beyond her limits, and Adrian felt it like a punch. "You're not in trouble," he said quietly. "Neither of you." But she didn't seem to hear him over her own spiraling panic. Her breath came fast, shallow like a person drowning above water. The CPS agent stepped forward. "Ma'am, I'm afraid we need to conduct a welfare check. It's routine." "A welfare check?" she gasped. Why? I didn't do anything wrong. I didn't—" "It's standard when a minor is found alone on private property," the agent explained gently. Her eyes darted to Maya. "You weren't alone. Why did you go there? Why didn't you wait for me? Why—" Her voice wavered again. "I'm trying, baby. I'm trying so hard." Maya's lip wobbled. "I know, Mom." Adrian felt like an intruder, like he was witnessing something he wasn't meant to see. A mother trying to hold her world together with frayed threads. A child trying not to make it worse. He exhaled slowly. "Ma'am," he said softly, "she's not in trouble. She came because she was being bullied. She was scared." The woman's face twisted in pain. "They did it again?" Maya nodded. Tears filled her mother's eyes. She brushed Mia's cheek. "Baby, you should have come home." "There were older kids in the street," Maya whispered. "I was scared." Her mother closed her eyes. A sound escaped her, not a sob. Something quieter. Something raw. The CPS agent waited respectfully before clearing her throat. "Ma'am, may we come inside?" The woman tensed, instantly. Is that necessary?" "It's procedure." Her eyes flickered with the shame of a parent who knows her home isn't what inspectors want to see. Adrian stepped forward. "Ma'am," he said gently, "we're not here to judge you." But she didn't look at him. She was staring past him, at the cameras that had followed earlier, at the expensive SUV outside, at the billionaire standing in her hallway. She straightened her posture with a quiet dignity he hadn't expected. Then she opened the door wider. "Please," she whispered. "Come in." The apartment was small, very small. A single dim lamp lit the living room. The couch was old, patched in one corner. Clothes were folded on the table, meticulously despite the lack of space. A stack of college textbooks sat beside a bucket of cleaning supplies. The carpet was worn bare in spots. The kitchen sink held exactly 2 dishes soaking in water. Poor? Yes. Dirty? No. He swallowed. The CPS agents scanned the small space with professional eyes. The older agent nodded sympathetically. "Thank you for letting us inside." Maya's mother forced a tight smile. "I keep it clean. I promise. I work nights." I do my best." Her voice trembled on the last word. Adrian felt heat prick behind his ribs. She shouldn't have to justify survival. The younger agent checked the fridge, half empty but organized. The older one checked the bathroom, clean. The bedroom, tiny but tidy. The child's bed, neatly made. Everything screamed one truth. There was no neglect here, just poverty and exhaustion, and a woman doing everything she could. When the agents returned to the living room, the older one nodded. "Ma'am, your home is safe. Your daughter is clearly loved and cared for." Maya's mother sagged into a chair, relief crashing through her in a visible wave. Adrian felt a breath leave him too. The older agent continued. "However, because the child was found alone on commercial property, protocol requires a follow-up evaluation and a visit from a school liaison to address the bullying. We also recommend counseling support." Her face paled. "Counseling? I can't afford—" "It will be covered," the agent assured her, "through the district." She nodded slowly. Then the younger agent turned to Adrian. "We'll need your statement, Mr. Hale. The moment you first encountered the minor, the condition she was in, the events leading up to the report." Adrian nodded. "Of course." But before speaking, he glanced at Maya. She was sitting on the couch beside her mother, shoulders tight, face pale, hands fidgeting as if she believed her entire world hinged on every adult's word in the room. He spoke carefully. She was frightened, alone, hungry. Her lunchbox was crushed. She told me older kids threw it away and stepped on it. Both CPS agents nodded, scribbling notes. "She came into my building seeking safety," he continued. "And I ensured she had it." His voice tightened. He couldn't help it. She did nothing wrong. The CPS agents exchanged a look, this time approving. "Thank you, Mr. Hale," the older agent said. She turned to the mother. "We'll schedule the follow-up visit and connect you with resources. You're doing well, ma'am. Truly." And then, just like that, the tension that had filled the apartment like a storm cloud began to slowly, quietly dissipate. The agents left. The door closed. Silence. A heavy one. Maya's mother sank onto the couch and exhaled shakily. "I'm so sorry," she whispered to Adrian without looking up. "You shouldn't have been dragged into this." "I chose to be," he replied. She flinched, like she wasn't used to anyone choosing to help. Her hands shook as she brushed her daughter's hair. "Thank you for feeding her. For keeping her safe." Maya leaned against her mother, small and tired. "Mom, they threw my lunch again." The woman's jaw tightened. "I'll talk to the school." "It won't help," Maya whispered. "They don't listen." That sentence, quiet, hopeless, cut Adrian deeply. He stepped closer. "May I speak with you both?" he asked. The mother looked up slowly, meeting his eyes for the first time with full awareness of who stood in front of her. Power, wealth, influence, the kind of man life usually never let cross paths with someone like her. But there was no fear in her gaze now, just exhaustion, and something like gratitude. She nodded. He drew a steady breath, and for the first time in years, he allowed softness into his voice. "I can help," he said simply, "but only if you want me to." Maya lifted her head. Her mother frowned faintly. "Help? How?" He met her eyes. "I can make sure the school takes the bullying seriously. I can ensure Maya gets proper meals, support, tutoring, protection, whatever she needs. I can connect you with job resources, housing assistance." Her mother stiffened. "I don't want charity." Adrian shook his head. "It's not charity," he said quietly. "It's responsibility." "To who?" she asked softly. His gaze shifted to Maya, her small, tired, hopeful face, her quiet bravery, her frail dignity. Her, he said. Her mother inhaled carefully. She studied him, looked deeper, searched for motives, angles, hidden strings. She found none, because he didn't have any. Finally, slowly, her expression softened. "If you truly want to help," she whispered, "then, yes, please. We could use it." Maya's eyes widened with hope so sudden it was heartbreaking, and Adrian felt something inside him settle with quiet certainty, something he hadn't felt in years, a sense of purpose, a sense of meaning, a sense that maybe, just maybe, the universe had given him one fragile chance to protect someone again. He met Mia's gaze. She whispered, "Are you still staying with me?" His heartbeat stumbled. "Yes," he said, and meant it more deeply than he understood. The moment Alexander stepped into the small interrogation room, the world felt too tight. The overhead bulb hummed faintly, flickering every few seconds like a tired heartbeat. The air was cold, unnaturally cold, like the chill of a place where hope came to die slowly and quietly. He felt it scrape along his arms, down his spine, settling in his chest with a heaviness he could barely breathe under. Across the small metal table sat the woman he'd been told was Nora's mother, Lydia. She looked thin, but not in the delicate way of someone who forgot to eat. It was the hollowness of someone who had lived too long in hunger. Hunger for food, for safety, for anything resembling peace. Her hair was tangled, her eyes red as if she had spent the last hours trying desperately not to cry. Her wrists trembled where they rested atop the table, the skin still red from the handcuffs that had been clipped off only minutes ago. She lifted her head at the sound of the door closing behind him. Alexander felt her gaze hit him like a strike to the ribs, guarded, ashamed, but also carrying something else. Something like fear, or perhaps resignation, as if she had already decided the world had made its judgment and she didn't dare hope he would be different. He swallowed, the sound too loud in the sterile room. "Lydia," he said softly. Her lips parted slightly. "You're the man who brought her in." Not quite a question, more like she was testing the shape of the truth. He nodded once. "I am." There was a silence, the kind that pressed in from all sides. Then she whispered, not lifting her eyes, How is she?" The question nearly broke him, because the answer twisted painfully in his chest. He forced himself to sit across from her, though every instinct screamed to stand, to move, to try to outrun the discomfort clawing through him. "She's safe," he said. "She's resting now." A breath shuddered out of Lydia, fragile and trembling. She cupped her hands over her mouth as though she were holding in a scream. "Thank God," she whispered. "Thank God." But then she went still again, like someone remembering she didn't deserve relief. He saw it, saw the shame flood her eyes, saw her shoulders curl inward. She was preparing herself for his anger, preparing for the world to accuse and condemn. And suddenly, Alexander knew something with a cold, sharp clarity. She believed she had failed. She believed she had no right to be Nora's mother. And she believed she was alone. He wasn't sure why this realization hit him so hard, but it did. The first question. "Lydia," he began gently, "I need you to help me understand what's been happening. They won't tell me everything. CPS won't let me see the full report. But Nora, she's been through too much for someone her age." Her eyes flicked up at that, quick, frightened. "I know," she whispered. That single whispered sentence sank into him like a stone through water. Not denial, not excuses, not anger, just acknowledgement. and grief. Alexander leaned forward slightly. She told me her lunch has been thrown away repeatedly. His voice held low steadiness, but inside him something churned. She was terrified today. She hadn't eaten. She was freezing. At that, something in Lydia cracked open. Her composure, thin as paper, tore completely. "I tried," she choked, tears spilling before she could hide them. "I tried so hard, but I couldn't." Her hands shook violently. "I couldn't keep her warm. I couldn't keep her fed. Everything I did, everything kept slipping through my fingers." Her sob came out broken, a sound so raw that it pierced him. "I didn't throw her lunch away," she whispered desperately. "I would never, never hurt my little girl. They accused me of neglect because she came to school without food, but I packed it. I swear I packed it every day." He felt something cold and poisonous coil through him. "Then who?" he started. But before he could finish, she covered her face, shoulders shaking. "Her teacher said she didn't have any," Lydia whispered through her fingers. "And then one day they found her shaking from hunger, and they said I hadn't fed her. But I did. I did." She lowered her hands, eyes wet and pleading. "Please believe me." He did. He didn't know why, but he did. Something about the desperation in her voice, the trembling sincerity, the raw edges of her shame. It was too honest to be manufactured. Alexander felt a weight press down on his chest, sharp and suffocating. "What's happening at home?" he asked quietly. At that question, Lydia froze. Her eyes darted to the small, cracked window on the upper wall, as if afraid the shadows might be listening. Her voice sank to barely above a breath. Her father. The name that changed everything. Alexander felt the world slow. He hadn't known Nora had a father in the picture. CPS hadn't mentioned it. The hospital hadn't mentioned it. Nora herself had spoken only of her mother, and even then, with a carefulness he hadn't understood. Now he did. "What does he do to her?" Alexander's voice was low steel. "No," Lydia whispered urgently, shaking her head. "No, he doesn't touch her. He never laid a hand on Nora." Her hands gripped the edge of the table as if anchoring herself. "It's me, he—" She stopped abruptly, pressing her lips together. She didn't need to finish. His knuckles tightened painfully against the metal table, but she went on, voice trembling. "Nora hides her lunch. She keeps her little backpack under her bed. She thinks if he sees it, he'll take it and throw it out to punish me." Her shoulders crumpled inward. "She's just a child, but she tries so hard to protect me. And in doing so, she ended up the one suffering." A tear slid down her cheek. "I failed her." "No," Alexander said immediately, fiercely. "You didn't." She shook her head violently. "I didn't stop him. I tried to leave so many times, but She swallowed against a sob. "Every time I tried, he made Nora cry. He never hurt her, but he scared her. She begged me not to leave, and I couldn't put her through that, so I stayed." Her hands trembled. "He locked our food away. He decided when and if we ate. If we displeased him, he punished us by withholding it." She wiped her face, exhausted. "Sometimes he would leave for days, and if I didn't stretch things perfectly, Nora went without." Alexander's heartbeat roared in his ears. The image was unbearable. Nora, frightened, small, trying to hide her food under the bed like a tiny soldier protecting the last scrap of hope. He inhaled slowly. "Where is he now?" "Gone," she whispered. "He vanished 3 nights ago. I don't know where, but I know he'll come back." A cold tension rippled through Alexander's entire body. The system's wall. The door opened before he could speak again. A CPS worker entered. Miranda Hale, expression tight, posture stiff. She held a clipboard and looked at him with the strained tolerance of someone who wished he weren't here at all. "I'm going to have to ask you to step out, Mr. Atwood." His jaw flexed. "We're in the middle of—" "I understand," she said, not quite meeting his eyes. "But this is no longer a conversation you can legally be part of. Lydia's case is now under formal review. We need to remain compliant with procedure." Procedure. That cursed word. Lydia immediately straightened, panic flickering across her face like a shadow in a storm. Alexander rose slowly. "She's telling the truth. You need to listen to her." Miranda's gaze hardened slightly. "We will conduct our own evaluation. And, Mr. Atwood, please remember you are not family." The words were meant to be neutral, but they sliced cleanly through him. Not family, not anything. But Nora's small voice echoed in his memory. "Why are people kind to me only when no one is looking?" He exhaled slowly, forcing himself to stay composed. "I'll be outside," he told Lydia gently. "You're not alone in this." For a moment she stared at him, disbelieving, fragile, almost afraid to accept the sentiment. Then she nodded. He stepped out into the hallway as the door shut behind him. And just like that, everything inside him ignited. Baston. Inside the Billionaire. He paced the hallway like a caged force, each step a strike against the cold linoleum. His chest burned with a suffocating mix of rage and helplessness. The system, the rigid, blind, procedural machine, was about to swallow Lydia whole, and with her, Nora. And yet he had no legal claim. No right to intervene, no authority to bend the gears of bureaucracy. But he had money, influence, power. Normally he wielded them with careful restraint, but this time he felt something shift inside him, something old and rusted tearing open. He remembered the small, shaking warmth of Nora's hand clutching his sleeve in the hospital. The trust in her eyes, trust she had no reason to give. He remembered her whisper, barely audible. "They threw my lunch away again." Alexander stopped pacing, his breath steadying into something sharp, purposeful. He wasn't going to let the system break this child. He wasn't going to let a terrified mother be punished for surviving. And he wasn't going to let a ghost of a man continue hiding in the shadows. He pulled out his phone. "Thomas," he said when his lawyer answered. "I need you at the hospital now, and I need a full background check on a man named—" He stopped. He didn't know the name. Nora had never said it. Lydia had spoken around it, but never aloud. His jaw clenched. "Bring a specialist," he said. "A private investigator. I want everything. History, employment records, police reports, social service interactions, everything." He ended the call. And then he waited, standing in the hallway like a sentinel, eyes fixed on the door he'd been forced to leave. He couldn't hear what was being said inside, but he could feel it, feel the tremor in the air, as if tension seeped through the walls, as if something fragile were being tested to its breaking point. He pressed a hand over his mouth, an unfamiliar ache tightening his ribs. He hated this feeling. Helplessness, loss of control. He hadn't felt it since... No, he wouldn't go there. Not now. But in the silence, memories pushed at him. How many times had he seen people in pain and walked away? How many times had he told himself it wasn't his place? How many times had he buried the guilt under the weight of his responsibilities? This time, the guilt was no longer silent. It roared. The door opens. When the interrogation room door finally opened, Lydia emerged, hands trembling. Miranda followed behind her with the crisp, cool professionalism of someone trying very hard not to show emotion. Alexander took a step forward. Lydia. Miranda lifted a hand, stopping him. "We're transferring her to a temporary protective shelter," she said. "Nora will remain in protective care until the investigation is complete." Lydia's breath hitched at that, pain flashing across her face. Alexander's stomach dropped. "How long?" he demanded. Miranda didn't answer immediately. Then, with a sigh, "Days, weeks, depending on the complexity." Lydia's voice broke on a whisper. Please don't take me too far from my baby." Miranda softened only slightly. "You'll be allowed monitored visitation once we finish intake." Alexander felt his jaw tighten. "This is unnecessary. She's not the threat." Miranda met his gaze evenly. "The threat hasn't been identified. That makes her part of the equation." He wanted to argue, to fight, to tear the entire system apart brick by brick. But Lydia suddenly shook her head gently at him, silently pleading for him not to make it worse. He swallowed the anger burning his throat. Lydia whispered to him as she passed, voice small as a breeze through broken glass. "Tell her I love her. Please. Tell her I'm trying." He nodded once, slow, steady. "I will." She was led away, footsteps soft and shaking. Miranda turned, preparing to leave as well, but Alexander called after her quietly. "Keep her safe." Miranda paused, surprising him. Then she nodded once, barely perceptible. "We will do everything the law allows." And then she too walked down the dim hallway, leaving Alexander standing alone in the cold, humming silence. The promise. He exhaled slowly. Then he turned toward the pediatric wing, toward Nora. Every step he took felt like a vow strengthening inside him. He would not let this child be swallowed by bureaucracy. He would not let her mother be blamed for the sins of a man still hiding in the shadows. He would not rest until he found him. But above all, he would not let Nora feel alone. Not again. Not ever. As he reached the door to her room, he paused, hand on the cool metal handle. He whispered into the quiet hallway, soft, steady, fierce. "I'm not walking away from you." Then he opened the door and stepped inside. The hallway leading back to Nora's room felt longer than it had earlier, as though the walls themselves had stretched and pressed inward, narrowing around Alexander with each step he took. The sterile lighting above him flickered faintly, sending shadows sliding along the white floor like silent, watchful ghosts. He had never feared walking into a room before. Boardrooms, courtrooms, press conferences, none of them had ever made his breath falter the way this moment did. He paused outside the pediatric door, staring at the small cartoon whales painted across its blue surface. They smiled cheerfully, their little tails curled as if inviting him into a world that was meant to be soft, safe, warm. Nora's world had never been any of those things. Alexander closed his eyes, inhaling slowly, steadying himself. He didn't want her to see the storm in him, the anger at the system, the fury toward a faceless man who had turned her life into a battlefield, the ache he didn't quite understand. He wanted her to see something else, something gentler, something safe. He pushed the door open. The child on the edge of sleep. The room was quiet except for the rhythmic whisper of the heart monitor and the faint hum of the air purifier. Soft moonlight filtered through the blinds, blue-tinted and serene as it spilled across the blanket. Nora lay curled on her side, her small hands tucked under her cheek. Her dark curls framed her face like a halo, messy, tangled, soft, and her lips were parted slightly as she breathed. But even in sleep, her brow was furrowed. Alexander's chest tightened painfully. A child that small shouldn't carry worry while unconscious. He stepped closer, each footstep controlled. He didn't want to wake her, not yet. He simply let himself look at her, let himself absorb the reality that this tiny human had already lived through more fear than any adult should. Her little socks were mismatched, one pink, one pale yellow. Her shoes sat under the chair, scuffed at the toes. Her jacket lay folded beside her bed, still damp from the earlier storm, the sleeves too short for her growing arms. Everything about her spoke quietly, heartbreakingly. She outgrew her things months ago. He swallowed hard. He had no right to feel this protective, not after knowing her only hours. But something about her had pierced through every defense he had built over years of emotional distance. He moved to the chair beside her bed and finally allowed himself to sit. The metal squeaked under his weight, making him wince. But Nora didn't wake. He rested his elbows on his knees, leaning forward. He wanted to tell her everything. That her mother fought for her. That none of this was her fault. That she wouldn't be alone tonight. But he stayed silent, letting the stillness settle around them like a fragile peace. The whisper in the dark. After several minutes, Nora stirred. Her eyelashes fluttered. A small frown tightened her face. Then her eyes blinked open, slow, heavy, unfocused. At first, she didn't see him. She looked around the room with sleepy confusion, her breathing quickening just slightly. She pulled her blanket up instinctively, her small fingers bunching the fabric near her chin. Her voice came out faint. "Mama?" Alexander's heart clenched. He leaned forward a little, keeping his tone soft. "Nora?" She turned her head, and when her eyes found him, she froze like a startled sparrow. Mr. Atwood?" she whispered. He nodded gently. "I'm right here." She blinked, struggling to wake fully, struggling to understand why the world didn't match what she expected. Then the realization hit her, sharp, visible, painful. Her lower lip trembled, and she whispered the question that shattered him. "Did I do something bad?" He felt the breath leave his body. "No," he said immediately. Leaning closer, his voice low and firm but warm. "You didn't do anything wrong. Not one thing." Her eyes filled quickly. Brimmed with tears, she tried desperately to blink back. "But they took Mama away," she whispered. "People only take you away when you're naughty." His chest burned, a slow, searing pressure, as if his ribs were struggling to contain the surge of emotions inside him. "That isn't what happened," he said. "Your mama loves you, very much, and she did nothing wrong." She swallowed, her tiny throat trembling. "Then why did they... why..." Her voice cracked. "Please don't lie." He closed his eyes briefly, steadying himself. "I'm not lying," he said quietly. "Sometimes grown-ups need help. And sometimes the people who try to help don't understand the whole story yet." She looked at him with desperation. Fragile and trembling. "Will I see her again?" He nodded. "Yes," he said softly. "I promise you will." She hiccuped a small sob, wiped her eyes with the back of her tiny hand, and whispered, "I miss her." He reached out slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. She didn't. Her fingers were cold as she let him hold her hand. Something inside him broke and reformed all at once. Confessions in the moonlight. Nora took several shaky breaths, trying to be brave. He could see it, how she forced herself into stillness, trying to keep from crying too loudly, trying not to be a burden. No child should have to learn silence as a survival skill. He tightened his grip just slightly, enough to be a steady weight in her small world. "Do you want to talk?" he asked gently. She hesitated. Then, Can I tell you a secret?" He nodded.
Always.
Her gaze drifted downward, to the blanket she twisted nervously between her fingers.
Sometimes, she whispered, I pretend my tummy doesn't hurt. And I pretend I'm not scared. And I pretend things are okay, so Mama won't cry.
The words were so soft, they barely existed. Alexander felt something inside him twist sharply, like a blade turning. No child should feel responsible for protecting their parent from suffering. He didn't trust his voice not to crack, so he didn't speak at first. He simply squeezed her hand. After a long pause, she continued, voice fragile as spider silk. When people say I'm lying about my lunch getting thrown away, her breath hitched. It makes Mama look bad, and I don't want anyone to think she's bad. She's not. Her face scrunched into a small, anguished frown. She tries so hard. He felt every word like a weight added to his chest, one after the other, until he could barely breathe. I know she does, Alexander said, and I know you do too. Nora blinked in surprise. You know? He nodded. I see you, Nora. I really do. She looked at him, really looked, and something in her expression softened, melted, trembled. Then she whispered, barely audible, Can I stay with you tonight? Just until Mama comes back? It wasn't a request. It was a plea. A child's plea. His throat tightened, and he felt the full force of how deeply she had reached inside him. Yes, he said quietly. I'm not leaving you. The weight of a promise. The night deepened outside the hospital window. Shadows stretched across the room like long, thin fingers. The moon hung low, a pale silver coin pressed against the sky. Nora's grip didn't loosen. Not once. Not when the nurse came to check her vitals. Not when a guard walked by the door. Not even when her eyes grew heavy again, her body fatigued by hours of fear and crying. She held on to him like he was the only solid thing in a world made of crumbling shadows. And the terrible truth was, he was beginning to want to be exactly that. As she drifted back into sleep, her head tilted slightly toward him, curls brushing her cheek. Her breathing settled into a soft, uneven rhythm. He brushed a stray curl from her forehead, and for the first time in years, years filled with polished floors, board meetings, and empty penthouses, he felt something warm settle into the cold spaces inside him. Responsibility, tenderness, purpose. A quiet voice in his mind whispered, You are no longer a bystander. He looked at her small, sleeping form, at the way she clung to his hand even in dreams, and he made a vow he had never planned to make. Whatever happened next, he would protect this child, not out of charity, not out of guilt, but because something in their lives had collided with force and meaning. He would find her father. He would prove Lydia innocent. He would drag the truth into the light, and he would not give up, not until Nora was free from the shadows that haunted her. The unseen threat. A soft tapping broke the stillness. Alexander looked up. In the doorway stood his lawyer, Thomas Kay. The man's expression was tight, troubled. He held a folder in his hands, a thick one, not a good sign. Alexander rose carefully, separating his hand from Nora's with a slow, gentle motion so she wouldn't wake. He stepped into the hallway, closing the door behind him. What did you find? He asked. Thomas exhaled through his nose, looking around before leaning closer. Alexander, this man, Nora's father. He tapped the folder, voice low. You're not going to like what I found. Alexander's blood chilled. Thomas continued. He's not missing. He's hiding. He flipped the folder open. He's been evading law enforcement for 3 years, and more importantly, he knows we're looking for him now. A razor of fear sliced through Alexander's stomach. How? He demanded. Thomas swallowed. He was seen outside the hospital. Tonight. Alexander felt the ground tilt under him. He's watching, Thomas said quietly, and he knows his little girl is here. And inside the dim hospital room, unaware of the danger creeping closer, Nora slept with her small hand still curled where his had been. Rain hammered against the car windows like 1,000 tiny fists, each one echoing the turbulence inside Ethan Hale's chest. The world outside was blurred. City lights smeared into streaks of gold and red as his driver tore through the streets. But Ethan barely saw any of it. He sat rigid in the back seat, his jaw locked, his hands trembling despite the heat blasting from the vents. He could still hear the doctor's voice. He could still see the way Nora's small body looked under those harsh hospital lights. He could still smell antiseptic and blood and fear. It was all replaying, looping, choking him. "Sir, should we call ahead?" the driver asked, voice shaking. "No." Ethan's voice cracked, barely more than breath. "Just drive." The words felt jagged in his throat. He had always spoken with authority, with control, with unwavering certainty. But tonight his voice sounded like it belonged to another man, one he didn't recognize, one he didn't want to be. A man who was too late. A man who didn't protect the child who'd trusted him. The child who called him Mr. Ethan, with a shy smile despite the bruises she tried to hide. His chest tightened painfully, like a hand was squeezing around his lungs, crushing them. He pressed a fist against his sternum as if he could force the ache to loosen. It didn't. He closed his eyes, and the memory hit him again. Her scream. High, desperate, cut short by impact. The sound of a metal tray crashing to the floor. The thud of her tiny body against concrete. "Stop," Ethan whispered to himself. But the memory didn't stop. It sharpened. Because he'd felt her go limp in his arms. Because her blood had smeared across his shirt. Because he'd sprinted through traffic with her pressed to his chest, yelling for an ambulance, willing her to breathe. A raw sound escaped him. He brought a hand over his mouth, fingers trembling. Ethan Hale, billionaire, feared in every boardroom, worshipped by investors, envied by rivals, was breaking apart in the back seat of an SUV because a little girl not even related to him, may not survive the night. What if he lost her? What if... Stop! The driver braked sharply, jerking him out of his spiraling thoughts. "We're here," he whispered. Ethan looked up at the looming hospital entrance, its floodlights cutting through the storm like blades. People rushed in and out, silhouettes moving with urgency, but all he saw, all he needed to see, was the revolving door where they had taken her hours earlier. He forced the car door open. Cold rain slapped his face immediately, soaking his hair, his suit, his shoes within seconds. The wind ripped at him, aggressive and icy, but Ethan hardly felt it. He walked as if in a trance, each step heavy, his heartbeat too loud in his ears. Inside the lobby, everything smelled sterile, bright, unforgiving. He scanned for the pediatric ICU. A nurse spotted him and froze, recognizing him instantly. "Mr. Hale, sir." "Where is she?" Ethan's voice was rough, unsteady. "Sir, the surgical team hasn't come out yet." He moved past her without another word. He reached the hallway and saw the light. The red "Surgery in Progress" sign glowed like an omen above the double doors. Ethan's throat tightened. He sank into a chair but instantly shot back up again, unable to sit, unable to breathe, unable to exist in stillness while she fought for her life behind those metal doors. He paced, back and forth, hands on hips, breath shaky. Every few seconds he would glance at the surgery doors as if sheer willpower might force them open. He didn't care who recognized him. He didn't care that staff whispered his name. He didn't care that the media had already blocked the emergency exit hours ago. He cared only about Nora. He leaned one hand on the wall, his palm flat,
head bowed. "Please," he murmured into the quiet, a prayer he had not spoken in years.
"Please let her live." Hours earlier. He'd arrived at the shelter with warm food, blankets, and a half-formed plan to get Nora out of there permanently. He had no idea that instead of finding her hungry, he would find her bleeding. The moment he walked in, he heard the shouting. A crash. Children screaming in fear. Then he saw her. A blur of small limbs and thin shoulders, shoved violently by a staff member whose face was contorted with frustration. And it wasn't an accident. It wasn't carelessness. It was rage. Before Ethan could even process the sickening shock, Nora's head hit the floor with a sound he would never forget. Then her body went still. Everything after that played out like a nightmare he could not wake from. His roar. The man's stammered excuses. Ethan's fists shaking with the need to strike back. Nora limp in his arms, her warm blood seeping through his fingers, her eyelids fluttering weakly. Her whisper, "Mr. Ethan, hurts." He'd shouted for someone to call 911. He'd begged her to stay awake. He'd run with her pressed to his chest like she was made of something sacred, because she was. She was hope. She was innocence. She was the one person in his cold, hollow life who smiled at him without wanting something in return. And he couldn't lose her. Not like this. Not because of cruelty. Not because he was too slow to protect her. Back in the present. Ethan leaned against the sterile white wall outside the operating room, his breathing uneven. He checked the time. He had been standing there for nearly 3 hours. The storm outside intensified, and thunder rattled the hospital windows. The sound reverberated through the hallway like distant artillery fire, but even that couldn't drown out the pounding of his own heartbeat. Footsteps approached. Ethan turned. The lead surgeon stepped out, her expression unreadable behind the mask dangling from her wrist. Ethan's lungs seized. He moved toward her, slow, almost fearful. "How is she?" he whispered. The surgeon hesitated, and that hesitation nearly took Ethan to his knees. Then she spoke. "She's alive." The words hit him like a physical blow. His hand clutched his chest. He swallowed hard, eyes burning. "She suffered a severe concussion," the surgeon continued gently. "And she lost more blood than we would like. But she's a fighter. She made it through surgery." Ethan exhaled shakily. He almost staggered backward. He closed his eyes, letting the relief crash over him like a violent wave. "She's not out of danger," the doctor said softly. "But there is a chance." A chance. It wasn't a guarantee. It wasn't certainty. It wasn't the safety he wanted with every fiber of his being. But it was hope. He would take it. He nodded once, unable to speak. His voice simply wasn't there. "May I see her?" he finally managed. "She's being moved to ICU now. One visitor. Since you're the one who brought her in, you can stay." He nodded again. Then he followed. ICU room 314. The beeping machines met him first, sharp, steady, too loud in the quiet room. The lights above were dim, casting long shadows against the pale blue walls. And then he saw her. Nora lay in the narrow bed, far too small for the countless wires attached to her. Her tiny arms were bandaged. Her left cheek was swollen. A fresh IV line snaked into her arm. Her dark curls were damp with sweat, stuck to her forehead. She looked fragile, breakable, humanity at its most defenseless. Ethan's throat tightened once more. He approached slowly, as if afraid she might disappear if he moved too quickly. He stopped beside her bed. His hand hovered above hers. Then, very gently, he took her small hand into his own. It was cold. He swallowed hard. "I'm here," he whispered, voice cracking.
I'm here, little one. I won't leave.
She didn't move. Her eyelids remained closed, but her fingers curled faintly around his, just barely, just enough to destroy him all over again. The pressure in his chest returned, but it wasn't panic now. It was something painful and protective and profound. He bowed his head. A breath escaped him, half sob, half prayer.
You didn't deserve this, he whispered. None of it. And I swear I will never let anyone hurt you again.
The storm outside raged on. But inside room 314, Ethan sat beside her bed for hours, his fingers intertwined with hers, refusing to look away even once. He didn't check his phone. He didn't respond to the dozens of frantic messages from board members. He didn't care that his empire was shaking without him. He cared about her. Just her. Sometime past midnight, exhaustion finally dragged at his body. He ran a hand over his face, feeling the roughness of unshaven stubble. His expensive suit was wrinkled, stained, damp with rain and dried blood. He looked like a man ruined, but he stayed. Because he had made a promise, silently and fiercely. I will protect you.
Even if the world tries to take you from me, even if I lose everything else.
A nurse peeked in softly.
Sir, would you like a blanket? A cot? Coffee?
He shook his head.
I'm not leaving her.
She nodded and slipped away. Ethan leaned back in the chair and kept his gaze on the rise and fall of Nora's chest. Every breath she took was a victory. Every heartbeat on the monitor was a reminder that she was still here. But beneath the relief was something darker, hotter, sharper. Anger. Because someone had hurt her. Because someone had thrown her lunch away again and again. Because someone had slammed her small body into the ground hard enough to nearly kill her. And Ethan Hale did not forgive easily. He lifted his head. His eyes were cold now, ashen steel sharpening into purpose. I will find the one who did this, he whispered. And I will make sure you're never anywhere near them again. His voice was no longer weak. It was decisive. It was the voice of a man who had just made a promise that nothing on earth, not courts, not CPS, not bureaucracy, would make him break. He looked at her again. Her fingers still curled around his, her breaths small but steady. You changed my life, he murmured. You don't know it yet, but you did. And then, in that quiet, dark room with only the storm to witness it, he whispered the truth he hadn't realized until tonight. I need you. His voice trembled. I didn't know I needed you until I almost lost you. The storm outside roared louder, as if answering him. Ethan sat there until dawn, holding her hand, not knowing that the worst was yet to come, not knowing that CPS was already on their way, not knowing that the fight to keep her had only just begun. Morning did not arrive gently. Light didn't spill into the room in soft gold. It sliced through the blinds in thin, cold strips that landed across Nora's motionless form. The machines around her hummed with sterile indifference, each beep steady, each measurement precise. But nothing about Ethan Hale felt steady or precise. He had not slept, not even for a moment. His hand still encircled Nora's, his thumb brushing her knuckles in slow, endless motions, as if anchoring her to the world. His eyes burned, raw, red, but he refused to look away from her even once through the long hours of night. He'd watched every rise and fall of her chest, every tiny flicker beneath closed eyelids, every shift in the glowing numbers on the monitors. Dawn had come too soon, and with it, danger. A soft cough at the door broke the fragile quiet. Ethan lifted his head. His eyes sharpened. A nurse in pale scrubs stood in the doorway, hesitant.
Mr. Hale,
she whispered.
CPS is here to speak with you.
The words hit him like ice down his spine. Already? Already? His jaw clenched. He lowered Nora's hand with infinite care, brushing a gentle thumb across her small fingers before standing. She looked impossibly small in the hospital bed. They wanted to talk to him, about her, when she was still pale, bruised, fighting for stability. He exhaled once, a slow, controlled release of breath. Cold, focused resolve slid into place behind his ribs. "Where are they?" he asked. "Conference room across the hall." He nodded once and stepped out. The conference room. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead, casting an unforgiving white glare over the table where two CPS agents sat waiting. The older one, a woman with a neat bun and tired eyes, straightened her clipboard as he entered. The younger one, a man with a well-meaning expression, closed his tablet. Both stood. "Mr. Hale," the woman said, extending her hand. "My name is Ms. Carver. This is my partner, Mr. Lewis." He didn't take her hand. He simply sat. A gesture that told them everything. He was done with pleasantries. He was done with bureaucracy. He was done pretending calm while Nora's future hung by a fragile thread. The agents exchanged a glance before taking their seats. Ms. Carver cleared her throat. "We're here regarding Nora Jennings," she began. His stomach twisted at the formality of the words. Nora Jennings, as if she were a file number, a case, an item to be processed, not a child fighting for her life from a bed only 20 feet away. "Before we begin," Ms. Carver said, "we want to thank you for getting her medical care so quickly. The paramedics said you were the one who carried her out." Ethan's jaw tightened. "She was dying," he said quietly. "What else was I supposed to do?" The room fell silent. Mr. Lewis leaned forward. "Mr. Hale, we need to verify the events leading to her injury." He faced them fully. "Everything that happened," he said, voice like cold, deliberate steel, "is documented in my statement with the police, with the hospital, and with my attorneys, but I'll repeat it." He took a breath. He saw it again. The shove, the impact, her small body collapsing. "I witnessed a staff member at the shelter throw her to the ground," he said. "Hard. Intentionally. She hit her head. She lost consciousness immediately." Ms. Carver scribbled notes. Mr. Lewis nodded slowly. "We've confirmed there were prior complaints of physical neglect at that shelter." Ethan felt a slow burn ignite in his chest. Neglect. That word was far too gentle. They called abuse neglect because the truth was too ugly for official forms. "Mr. Hale," Ms. Carver continued, "we're here today because Nora has no legal guardian to remain with her. The state needs to determine temporary custody while she recovers." Custody. The word struck him like a blade. His palms pressed against the table. "I am staying with her," he said. Both agents stiffened. "Sir," Ms. Carver began carefully, "you are not a relative." "I'm the one who saved her life." His voice didn't rise, but it didn't need to. The quiet, lethal certainty in it vibrated through the air. "I'm the only person she trusts." "We don't doubt your concern," she said. "But until she wakes and confirms her wishes, or until an emergency foster placement is arranged, she cannot legally remain under your care." He laughed once, a short, humorless sound. "She's unconscious," he said softly. "Are you planning to drag her out of my protection while she's hooked up to IVs?" Ms. Carver's eyes flickered. "No," she said. "But then she stays." "Mr. Hale," Mr. Lewis said gently, "the state has guidelines, procedures. We have to follow." "Stop!" Ethan leaned forward, elbows on the table, eyes narrowing. "Do you know how many bruises she has on her body?"
The agents faltered. Do you know how many times they threw her food away as punishment? Ms. Carver swallowed. He continued.
Softer, more dangerous. Do you know she cried when I brought her milk because she was afraid they'd take it from her again? Silence. Heavy, suffocating silence. He wasn't yelling. He wasn't threatening. He was telling the truth. And truth spoken with that much pain carried weight. Finally, Ms. Carver exhaled.
Mr. Hale, none of this changes the fact that the state must decide where she goes next.
He stared at them. His heartbeat slowed. His breathing steadied. His rage sharpened into tactical precision. Then decide she stays with me. Sir, I'm filing for emergency guardianship. The air left the room. Ms. Carver blinked.
You... what?
You heard me. He sat back in his chair, fingers steepled. I have the means, the resources, the home environment, and the legal team. The forms will be filed before your department finishes writing its report.
Mr. Lewis hesitated.
Emergency guardianship is an intense process, Mr. Hale. It requires substantial proof of the child's connection to you.
She has one, Ethan said quietly. I'm the one she came to when she was hungry. I'm the one she trusted. And I'm the one she cried to. His voice softened, softer than it had been since last night. She held my hand when she couldn't stand on her own. That bond matters. The agents exchanged a meaningful look. Ethan continued, his voice lower, steadier. You want to protect her? So do I. The difference is, I can actually do it. Ms. Carver's expression faltered, just slightly, but enough for him to see a crack in the procedural armor. But then she straightened. Until documentation is processed, she said carefully, we cannot authorize your presence as her guardian, but, given the circumstances, we can approve you as a temporary hospital companion. That will do, Ethan said. For now. For now, she echoed. They rose. Mr. Hale, Ms. Carver added softly, she's lucky you were there. He didn't respond. He simply walked out. The hallway. The moment he stepped back into the ICU corridor, his shoulders dropped, not in relief, but in exhaustion. His whole being felt stretched thin, brittle, like glass under strain. He paused outside Nora's room. Through the small window he could see her, still sleeping, still fragile, still fighting. His throat tightened again. He pushed the door open quietly. Back at her bedside, he sat, slowly, carefully. Every movement felt heavier today. Each inch of his body weighed down by the decisions he'd had to make before sunrise. He reached for Nora's small hand once more. It twitched faintly at his touch. His chest squeezed painfully. You're safe, he whispered. I'm not letting them send you anywhere else. Not again. Outside, footsteps approached, then faded away. He didn't look up. He just watched Nora's breathing. Monitors beeped softly. Fluids dripped rhythmically. The room smelled faintly of antiseptic and warmed blankets. He brushed a curl away from her forehead. You changed something in me, he murmured. You didn't mean to. You didn't even know you were doing it. His voice cracked. But you did. A shaky breath escaped him. I don't want to go back to who I was before I met you. He squeezed her hand gently. I won't. The media storm. His phone vibrated suddenly. For a moment he ignored it. Then it buzzed again. And again. He pulled it out. The screen flashed dozens of notifications from news outlets, investors, and board members. Breaking news. Billionaire Hale seen carrying injured child into ER Social Services, investigating private shelter after incident protests grow outside facility where little girl was hurt. Who is the child with Ethan Hale?
A headache flared behind his eyes. He turned the phone off. They would not make this about him. They would not turn her suffering into a headline. They would not use her pain for clicks. Not if he could help it. He leaned back in his chair. Rain had stopped, but the sky outside was still thick with clouds, gray and swollen. A storm lingering, waiting. Much like the one coming for him. Because CPS was not the only threat. Media pressure, family court scrutiny, the shelter's lawyers likely already preparing a defense, politicians sniffing for opportunity. The entire system was shifting toward him, gears grinding into motion, and he felt it. Pressure. Heavy, suffocating. But beneath it, beneath the fear, the exhaustion, the anger, was something stronger. Resolve. "I'm not letting them take you," he whispered. His voice grew steadier. "Not now. Not ever." He looked down at her face. Her eyelashes fluttered. His breath caught. "Nora?" Her lips parted, and in the softest hoarse whisper, barely audible, she breathed, "Mr. Ethan?" Emotion slammed into him so fast he had to close his eyes. He leaned forward. "I'm here," he whispered, voice breaking. "I'm right here." Her small fingers tightened around his, and with that fragile squeeze, that tiny, trembling gesture, the battle truly began. Nora's whisper, soft, thin, trembling, hung in the air like a fragile thread unraveling everything inside Ethan. "Mr. Ethan?" It shouldn't have been possible. Not this soon. Not after surgery. Not after the blood loss. But her eyelids fluttered again, slow and unsteady, as if every blink took more energy than her small body could spare. Ethan leaned closer, breath held. "Nora, I'm here," he whispered. Her lashes parted, only barely, and her eyes, hazy with pain and sedation, found him. The faintest spark of recognition flickered across her bruised features. He hadn't realized how desperately he needed that look until it reached him. Something inside him, something tight and coiled since last night, finally loosened. But relief lasted only one heartbeat. Then her face contorted, a tiny wince. Her lips quivered and a faint cry pushed past them. "Hurts." Ethan's chest split open as if someone had carved through his ribs. "I know," he breathed, brushing his thumb over her hand. "I know, sweetheart. I'm so sorry." Her eyes rolled weakly, flickering with disorientation. "Dark? I fell?" She didn't remember. Thank God she didn't remember. "It's okay," he said. "You're safe now." She tried to move her head but whimpered in pain. His pulse spiked. "Don't move," he whispered. "Just lie still. I'm right here." Her small fingers fluttered against his palm as if reaching for something. Comfort, security, anything familiar. He curled both hands around hers, steady and warm. She sighed, the sound brittle. Then her breathing slowed, drifted, softened into sleep again. Ethan exhaled shakily. Relief washed over him like a wave that almost knocked him backward. She had woken. She had spoken. She had known him. That was more than he'd dared hope for. But as he looked at her, pale, bruised, fragile, another feeling entered the room. Fear. Because now that she was conscious again, the system would move faster. He could already feel the noose tightening. The doctor arrives. The door cracked open. A woman in a lab coat stepped inside, flipping through a chart. Her expression brightened slightly when she saw Ethan. "She woke up?" Dr. Ray asked. "Yes," Ethan replied softly. "Just for a moment." She spoke. "That's a promising sign." Dr. Ray moved to check Nora's vitals, examining her pupils, her breathing, the monitors. Her numbers have been stabilizing since early morning. Ethan's shoulders loosened a fraction. She still has a long road, the doctor continued. But this means her brain is fighting. Her tone softened. Children are extraordinary that way. Ethan let out a long breath. His eyes returned to Nora. She's strong, he murmured, more to himself than to the doctor. Dr. Ray nodded. She is. But I need to prepare you for what's next. His gaze snapped up. What's coming? There will be more evaluations, she said. Neurological monitoring, pain assessments, physical therapy later on. But beyond the medical, she hesitated. A warning. Ethan felt the shift, the tightening, the approach of something he already sensed in his bones. CPS will escalate their involvement now that she's regained consciousness. The words landed heavy. Full. Expected. Unwelcome. They'll want to speak with her, Dr. Ray said gently, to hear her version of events. He stiffened. She's not ready for that. I know. The doctor's expression softened in sympathy. But legally, once she is conscious, they have the right to question her, even if she's weak. His jaw clenched. His voice dropped to a low, threatening quiet. She is not sitting through an interrogation while she's in pain. Dr. Ray didn't flinch, not out of fear, but compassion. You'll have a say, she said. You're listed as her hospital companion. They cannot force you to leave. He exhaled once, controlled. But beneath his calm surface, a storm churned. Her body is still healing, the doctor continued. But now that she's awake, the world outside this room will push in. Her eyes held his for a long moment. Be ready. The doctor left, and Ethan stood there, staring at the door long after it closed. Be ready. He already was. He had been ready since the moment Nora hit the floor. The first cry. A small, sharp sound sliced through the quiet. Nora whimpered. Ethan was beside her in an instant, pulling his chair close. Her eyes fluttered open again, unfocused, confused. Mr. Ethan? She whispered, voice trembling. He leaned close. I'm here, he said softly. Her lower lip trembled, then a sudden, heart-wrenching sob burst out of her, tiny but filled with pure fear. Ethan's breath caught. Nora, sweetheart, what's wrong? She lifted her bandaged hands weakly, her eyes filled. Don't take me back. Ethan froze, every muscle in his body locked. Nora, he whispered, voice breaking. Look at me. Her gaze, wet, scared, found him. I'm not taking you back, he said. Not now, not ever. Her breathing hitched. I promise you, he whispered. You're safe. She stared at him for a long, trembling second, and then she reached out, very slowly, very shakily. Her hand moved toward him. Ethan held perfectly still, throat tight. Her fingertips brushed the sleeve of his shirt. Then they curled weakly into the fabric, gripping. She held on to him like he was the last solid thing in a collapsing world. He swallowed hard. Carefully, he lifted her hand between both of his, enveloping it, sheltering it. It's okay, he murmured. I've got you. She whispered something so soft he had to lean in. Please stay. The world stilled. No billion-dollar deal, no board meeting, no legacy or empire. Nothing had ever meant more than those two fragile words spoken by a hurting child. I'm not leaving, Ethan said, and he meant it with everything inside him. The first threat. 2 hours later, she was asleep again, but Ethan's peace didn't last. A knock came at the door, a firm one. Ethan looked up sharply. A woman stepped in. CPS badge clipped to her blazer, expression composed, every movement precise. Ms. Carver, the same agent from earlier.
Mr. Hale, she said quietly, I need to speak with you.
He stood, his posture no longer softened by relief. What now? He asked.
Her statement, Ms. Carver replied. We need it.
No. She blinked.
Mr. Hale,
No, he repeated, voice low. She woke up less than 3 hours ago. She's in pain. She can barely keep her eyes open. It's procedure, Ms. Carver said gently. A case involving possible long-term harm requires immediate... You want the truth? Ethan asked. You'll get it, but not by traumatizing her again. Ms. Carver's expression tightened. Not anger, conflict. She stepped closer. Mr. Hale, the shelter's legal team is claiming this was an accident. They're saying she tripped, that they have no record of abuse. Ethan's hands curled into fists. Of course they were. Of course they would lie to save themselves. Ms. Carver lowered her voice. And they are pushing to reclaim custody of the children temporarily. Ethan froze. They want her back? They're claiming she belongs under their care while investigations continue. His blood ran cold. No, he said. No, absolutely not. Ms. Carver exhaled. Understand that I don't want that either. But without Nora's statement, he understood. And the understanding sliced through him. Nora's voice was her only shield, her only defense, her only protection. But she was so weak, so fragile. He looked back at the small body in the bed, her small chest rising and falling slowly. Her tiny fingers curled, her lashes still wet from crying. How could they force her to speak when she wasn't even stable? He turned back to Ms. Carver. What are you planning to ask her? Carver hesitated, then answered honestly. We need to ask her who hurt her. A tremor ran through Ethan's shoulders. He closed his eyes. Softly, he whispered, No. Mr. Hale? She's terrified, he said, voice raw. She woke up begging not to be sent back. She doesn't need an interview. She needs rest. Ms. Carver swallowed. He stepped closer. His voice lowered, cold, precise, deadly calm. If you push her, and her vitals crash, he held her gaze. Her blood will be on your department's hands. Silence. Heavy. Real. Ms. Carver looked down, then back up. I will delay the interview, she said finally. For now. I'll report that she is medically unstable. Ethan's tension eased by a fraction, but not enough. Thank you, he said quietly. She nodded. But Mr. Hale, delaying buys time, not safety. They still want her back. And without a statement, your emergency guardianship request is weak. His jaw locked. Then he said the one thing he hadn't planned to reveal yet. Then I'll make it stronger. Ms. Carver frowned. How? Ethan Hale stepped between her and Nora, his voice calm, his resolve absolute. I am prepared to take full legal custody. She stared at him, shocked, because that was no longer temporary guardianship. No extended visitation, no hospital companion status. This was something else entirely. Mr. Hale, she whispered, you're talking about adopting her. His eyes didn't waver. Yes, he said, if that's what it takes. Silence filled the room. Ms. Carver looked at him differently now, not as a billionaire meddling with procedure, not as a man trying to save a child, but as someone who was willing to become a father.
I will document your formal request, she said, voice barely steady. As she turned to leave, she paused. For what it's worth, she added quietly, she's lucky. Children with her background usually don't get someone fighting this hard for them. Ethan didn't answer. He just returned to the bed, sat down, took Nora's hand again, and whispered, I'm not losing you. But as he held her hand, he didn't see the shadow outside the hallway door. A man from the shelter, watching, listening, waiting, and smiling. Ethan didn't see the man in the hallway, not at first. He was too focused on Nora, on the soft rise of her chest, on the fragile warmth of her hand resting in his palm, on the slight tremble that still ran through her fingers even in sleep. She looked impossibly small in the hospital bed, swallowed by blankets and shadows and the aftermath of too many days where no one protected her. But the man outside the door saw everything, and he did not belong here. The Watcher. When Ethan finally stood to stretch his legs, exhaustion tugging at his spine, he paused at the door and glanced through the window to make sure no nurse needed in. That's when he saw him. A man, mid-50s, graying hair, trimmed short. Black jacket too heavy for the warm weather, expression stiff in a way that wasn't worry, it was calculation. He wasn't looking at the hallway. He was looking directly at Nora's door. Ethan's eyes narrowed. The man's gaze flicked to Ethan, then away. Too fast, too practiced. Ethan knew that look. He'd seen it in business sharks, hostile negotiators, men who didn't step into rooms. They hunted them. Ethan didn't move. The man did. He turned, calm as a man leaving church, and walked away down the corridor without a single glance back. But something in Ethan's chest tightened. That man wasn't a family member, wasn't staff, wasn't CPS, and he wasn't here for good. Ethan waited until he disappeared around the corner before stepping back into the room and pulling the door closed. He sat again, too aware now, too awake, too ready. Someone was watching Nora, someone who shouldn't be. The call he didn't want to make. It took him almost an hour to admit what he needed to do. He hated involving anyone in this, hated the idea of giving the situation enough weight to require backup, hated more than anything that Nora, tiny and still fighting for consciousness, needed protection from people who were supposed to have cared for her. But the image of the man outside the door wouldn't leave him. So Ethan pulled his phone out, dialed a number he rarely used. A voice answered on the second ring. Sir? Cole, Ethan murmured. I need surveillance on a floor of St. Verena Hospital. A sharp inhale. Cole never inhaled sharply. Are you hurt? No. Ethan's gaze went to Nora. But someone might try to hurt her. Cole went silent for 2 full seconds, a long time for a former private security commander trained to react instantly. I'll be there in 20, he said. And the line went dead. Ethan let out a slow breath. He hated this world. The world where men like Cole were necessary. The world where a child needed protection from people who were supposed to care for her. But this was the world Nora had been dropped into, and Ethan would not let it swallow her. Her pain returns. Hours passed, measured only by the slow drip of IV fluids and Nora's uneven breaths. Then her body tensed. Not much, just a tiny flinch, but enough that Ethan saw it immediately. Nora? He whispered. Her eyelids twitched. Her fingers curled inward as if they were trying to grab something they couldn't reach. A small, broken sound escaped her throat. Ethan leaned closer. Hey, you're safe. I'm here. Her eyes opened halfway, dazed, unfocused, heavy with pain. She blinked. Once. Twice. Then she looked at him. A slow tear slipped from the outer corner of her eye.
It hurts, she whispered. The words speared through him. He pressed the call button. We need pain meds in here. A nurse rushed in, soft-spoken but efficient, adjusting dosages with smooth, practiced hands. But Nora didn't take her eyes off him. Even as her breathing shuddered, even as her small chest rose in quick, terrified bursts, even as she tried not to cry and lost the battle. It's okay, Ethan murmured, brushing a tear from her cheek. You're going to be okay. Her voice cracked. Will they come back? He froze. Who? He asked softly. Her lips trembled. Them. Cold slid into his veins. He didn't push, didn't ask for names, didn't make her relive anything. Instead, he took her hand fully in his. No one is coming, he whispered. Not while I'm here. She stared at him for a long, fragile moment before drifting back into a drug-softened sleep. Ethan stayed leaning forward long after her breathing returned to a steady rhythm, but his jaw stayed clenched, because she wasn't asking about the pain. She was asking about the people who caused it. Cole arrives. The door opened without a sound. Ethan looked up. Cole stepped inside, tall, broad, built like a man who had never once lost a fight he meant to win. He wore civilian clothes but moved like a soldier. His eyes immediately swept the room, noting exits, sight lines, the angle of the windows. What's the situation? Cole asked quietly. Ethan nodded toward the hallway. A man in a black jacket, late 50s, staring at her door. Didn't react when he saw me. He pretended not to. That's what caught me. Cole's expression hardened. Where did he go? Left wing corridor. I'll check the cameras, Cole said. And I'll put 2 men at the elevators. No, Ethan said sharply. Cole blinked. We keep this low visibility, Ethan continued. The last thing she needs is to wake up surrounded by unfamiliar faces watching the door. Cole nodded slowly. Understood. I'll keep the security invisible. He stepped back, but Ethan added, Cole. Cole paused. No one touches her, Ethan said quietly. No one gets near her. If they try, I know, Cole replied. Then he left the room without another sound. Ethan returned to Nora. To her small, bandaged fingers, her quiet breaths, her fragile skin bruised in places no child should ever have bruises. He wasn't leaving her. Not for a second. Not anymore. The night shift. Hospital nights were always colder, always quieter, always filled with echoes that didn't belong to living people. Ethan pulled his chair closer to Nora's bed, elbows resting on his knees, hands pressed together under his chin. The only light came from the dimmed monitor glow and the tiny reading lamp he'd turned toward the wall. Hours stretched. A nurse came in, checked her, adjusted the blanket, left. Nora didn't wake again. But 3 times, Ethan caught movement outside the frosted window of her room. Not the man again. A nurse. A patient being wheeled by. A doctor on a phone call. None of them lingered. None of them looked twice. But Ethan didn't relax, not even for a second. He stayed awake long past midnight, posture rigid, eyes burning. His phone buzzed at 1:17 a.m. A text from Cole. Found him on cameras. Shelter staff. Name: Micah Grayson. Already left building. Will update. Shelter staff. The word hit like a slap. So someone from the shelter was watching Nora. Waiting. Monitoring. For what? Confirmation she was alive? Confirmation she could talk? Confirmation she would talk? Ethan's fists tightened so hard his nails cut into his palms. He typed back, "Keep him away from this floor. Anyone who approaches, call me first." Cole replied instantly, Already done. Ethan locked the phone and looked at Nora. Her breathing, her bandages, her small hands, everything inside him hardened. This wasn't just abuse. This wasn't just neglect. This was something deeper, darker, organized. And they wanted her silent. The second wake-up. At 2:34 a.m., she stirred again. Ethan straightened instantly. Her brows pinched, her lips parted. She made a soft sound, half whimper, half fear. "Nora," he whispered gently. "I'm here." Her eyes fluttered open. This time, there was no confusion, just fear. She scanned the room as if searching for shadows. Then she saw him. Her breathing slowed. She relaxed, not fully, but enough that the tension in her small shoulders softened.
"You didn't leave,"
she whispered. He shook his head. "No," he said. "I wasn't going to." She swallowed, wincing slightly. Can I ask something?" "Anything." Her voice was so small he had to lean in to hear it. "Why are you still here?" The question struck him like an unexpected blow. He exhaled, slow, steady, heavy. Because how could he explain? How could he tell her that he felt responsible for every tremor in her hands, every bruise on her skin? How could he admit that from the moment he carried her into the hospital, something inside him changed? How could he tell a child that he felt protective in a way he couldn't explain? So he answered simply, softly, truthfully. "Because you're not alone anymore." Her lips trembled. Another tear slipped down.
"Can I sleep now?" she whispered.
"Yes," he breathed. She closed her eyes, but before she drifted off, she said, "Thank you." And Ethan Hale, man who didn't cry, man who broke empires and stitched them back together, felt something inside him crack. The shadow returns. At 3:12 a.m., Cole returned silently. He opened the door, stepped halfway inside, and whispered, "Sir, we have a problem." Ethan stood instantly. "What now?" Cole's jaw tightened. "The man from the shelter just returned." Ethan's pulse thudded hard. "Did he try to come upstairs?" "No," Cole said. "He went to the parking lot." "Then why is this a problem?" Cole stared at him, eyes cold. "Because he wasn't alone this time." Ethan's blood chilled. "How many?" he asked. "3." Ethan's body went utterly still. "And they weren't watching the hospital." Cole lowered his voice even more. "They were watching this room's window from outside." Ethan didn't breathe for a moment. Then, "Keep eyes on them," he said. "No confrontation, not yet." Cole nodded once and slipped out. Ethan turned slowly toward the bed. Nora slept on, unaware. He walked to her side, placed a hand gently over hers, and whispered, "I won't let them touch you. Not again. Not ever. Not while he was alive. Whatever was happening at that shelter. Whoever those men were. Whatever they wanted from her. They had just made the worst mistake of their lives. They had made Ethan Hale their enemy." The hospital room felt colder by the time Ethan returned to Nora's bedside. Not physically, no thermostat had changed, but something in the air had shifted after Cole's warning. The temperature of the night, the shadows on the walls, the faint hum of fluorescent lights that seemed quieter than before. Danger had a way of stealing warmth. Ethan pulled the chair even closer to her bed, his chest tightening as he watched her tiny fingers twitch with every breath. He kept his hand near hers, not touching her, not yet, not wanting to wake her, but close enough that if she reached for him again, She wouldn't find empty space. He wouldn't give her empty space. Not anymore. Outside her window, 3 men stood in the darkness, watching, waiting, planning. And Ethan could feel every second of it like static building in the room. He didn't know who they were, but he knew what they wanted. Information, possession, control. The same things men always wanted when they feared that someone small, someone innocent, might speak the truth. Nora wasn't safe here. Not tonight. Not in any room where walls had windows. The quiet before the breaking point. At 3:40 a.m., Nora stirred again. Not the small flutter of pain, not the half-conscious shift of someone dreaming. This was different. Her breath hitched suddenly, like a child startled awake from a nightmare. Her body tensed beneath the hospital blankets, and her lashes flickered rapidly. Ethan leaned forward instantly. "Nora?" he whispered. Her eyes snapped open, not soft, not groggy, wide, panicked. Her chest began to rise too fast, too sharp, too quick. "Nora, hey, look at me," Ethan said, his voice low but steady. "You're safe. I'm right here." She didn't seem to hear him. Her gaze darted around the room, breath racing, hands shaking beneath the covers. Then her small fingers latched onto his wrist with surprising strength. Her voice trembled violently. "Don't let them take me back." The words shredded him. He swallowed, fingers gently wrapping around her hand. "I won't," he said. Not a promise. A vow that felt carved into bone. But Nora's panic didn't ease. She kept looking toward the window, as if she saw something out there. Something Ethan couldn't. Her voice rose a little higher, cracking with fear that had lived in her far too long. "They said they'll come. They said if I tell anyone, they'll... Her breath collapsed into a silent sob. Ethan reached up and brushed her hair back gently from her forehead, lowering his voice to a whisper meant only for her. "They're not coming here," he promised. "Not tonight. Not tomorrow. Not ever again." She finally blinked up at him, her eyes glassy, her small body shaking beneath the blankets. You promise?" Ethan felt something inside himself break. "I promise." Her breath trembled, her eyelids fluttered. And for the first time since she regained consciousness, her shoulders relaxed. Not completely, not fully, but enough that the panic faded into exhaustion. She drifted back to sleep with her hand still clutching his. Ethan didn't move, not even when his phone buzzed again. Not when the footsteps in the hallway paused that little too long. Not when his body screamed for rest. He stayed awake. Because she was afraid of the dark. And he refused to let her face it alone. The parking lot ghosts. At 4:05 a.m., Cole returned. He entered like a shadow, quiet, efficient, controlled. He glanced at Nora for only a fraction of a second before nodding toward the door. Ethan's jaw tightened. He followed Cole into the hallway, letting the door close softly behind him. "What now?" Ethan asked. Cole didn't waste time. "They're moving." Ethan's breath stilled. "Toward the building?" "Yes." "How many?" "Still 3. Cole paused. "But one of them is carrying something." "What kind of something?" Cole's expression was flat. "A bag big enough to fit a child." The world narrowed to a pinpoint inside Ethan's skull. His next words came out quiet. Too quiet. "Where are they now?" "Approaching the emergency entrance." Ethan didn't think, didn't plan, didn't reason. Instinct took over. "Lock down the floor," he ordered. "Already done." "Security?" "Stationed at all doors." "And those men?" Cole hesitated, just barely. "They're waiting near the ambulance bay, not entering yet." They're watching the building. Ethan exhaled slowly. They weren't here to rush in. They were here to wait, to watch, to snatch her the moment she was moved. The moment transport happened, the moment she was in a wheelchair, the moment she was vulnerable. They were waiting for morning, a hospital shift change, a shuffle of patients, a mess of movement and bodies and chaos. They wanted her out of this room. They wanted her back. Ethan's voice dropped to a dangerous calm. They're not getting her. Cole nodded once. Tell me what you need, he said. Ethan looked at the door, at the small silhouette sleeping in the bed behind it, and made up his mind. The decision that would change everything. Cole, Ethan said quietly, we're moving her. Cole blinked. Sir, not to another room. Ethan stepped closer, his voice lowered to a razor's edge. We're getting Nora out of this hospital tonight. Cole didn't blink this time. He stared, processing, calculating, adjusting. Then he nodded once. What's the plan? And Ethan told him. Not loudly, not dramatically, but with the calm, cold certainty of a man who had spent his entire life making impossible decisions, who had never lost anything he chose to protect. Not ever. The extraction. It took 10 minutes. 10 minutes to gather what Nora needed. 10 minutes to call in the private medical team Ethan trusted more than any facility. 10 minutes to arrange a secured transport car, blacked out and armored enough to shame government vehicles. 10 minutes to reroute hospital records so that her chart showed she was transferred to a different ward. 10 minutes for the men in the parking lot to completely lose track of her. Cole monitored them through hidden cameras. They think they're waiting for morning, he said. They're not moving. Good, Ethan replied, because they wouldn't see the exit Ethan planned to use. At 4:27 a.m., the private medical team arrived. 2 nurses, 1 physician, all discreet, all sworn to Ethan's confidentiality years ago, all loyal beyond question. They entered Nora's room with quiet precision. Her IVs were adjusted, her monitors disconnected, her lines converted to portable machines she could travel with safely. She briefly woke during the transfer. Her eyes fluttered open as the nurse lifted her gently onto a stretcher. Ethan? She murmured weakly. He stepped to her side. I'm here. Where are we going? Somewhere safe, he said. Her tiny fingers reached for him, and he immediately held her hand. She closed her eyes again, but not from fear this time, from trust in him. The weight of that nearly dropped him to his knees. The underground exit. Hospitals had more exits than anyone realized. Loading docks, service tunnels, maintenance corridors. Ethan chose the one no patient ever used, the one no visitor ever saw, the one that bypassed cameras and external doors entirely. Cole led the way. The medical team rolled the stretcher behind him. Ethan walked alongside Nora, one hand still resting on hers. The hallway was dim, lit by flickering fluorescent tubes and emergency lights that buzzed incessantly. The air smelled of concrete dust and cold metal pipes. But Nora slept through it. Safe beneath blankets. Safe beneath Ethan's hand. Safe for the first time in her life. At the far end of the corridor, Cole stopped. He pressed his hand against a metal panel on the wall. It clicked. A hidden door shifted open. Cold night air rushed in, and outside waited a black vehicle with tinted armoring so thick even headlights couldn't penetrate it. The kind of vehicle used to transport witnesses, presidents, targets. Tonight, it would carry a child. Ethan stepped aside as the stretcher rolled up the ramp, but when they began lifting her into the vehicle, Nora's hand slipped from his. Her small fingers twitched, searching. Ethan moved instantly. He climbed into the back seat beside her and took her hand again before she could even start to panic. Her breathing steadied. The nurse adjusted the blankets around her. "Where is she going?" Cole asked quietly from outside. "To the estate," Ethan said. Cole stared at him. "You're taking her home?" "Yes." It wasn't a question. It wasn't hesitation. It wasn't up for debate. Cole nodded once. "I'll handle the men outside." "Don't confront them yet," Ethan said. "Not until we know who they're reporting to." Cole's eyes sharpened. "Understood." Ethan shut the door. The drive into safety. The engine hummed softly as the vehicle pulled away from the hospital, taking a route no one would predict and no one could follow. Ethan didn't look back. He didn't need to. He had Nora's hand in his. Her small body curled beneath blankets, her breath soft and steady. Every time the vehicle hit a bump, he leaned slightly closer so she wouldn't feel it. Every time her fingers flexed, he tightened his hold. Every time a shadow passed the window, his body tensed instinctively. He didn't relax, not for a single second, not until the gates of his estate opened silently before them. Not until the vehicle passed through. Not until the doors closed behind them with a heavy, decisive thud. Only then, only when the car rolled to a final stop, did he exhale. Slow, deep, shaking. They'd made it. They were safe. She was safe. For now. The new room. The staff at the estate scrambled quietly as Ethan carried Nora inside, ignoring the stretcher, ignoring the nurse's polite protest. He lifted her carefully into his arms, her small head rested against his chest, warm and trusting. The night staff opened doors in silence, turning on lights with dim settings, preparing the guest room closest to Ethan's own. A soft bed, warm blankets, a nightlight shaped like a star placed near the corner by a thoughtful maid who knew nothing of the situation but everything about Mercy. Ethan laid Nora gently onto the bed. She didn't wake. Her breathing remained even. The nurse reconnected her portable monitors, checked her IV, adjusted her position. Ethan stood there, unmoving, watching, protecting, refusing to step even a foot away from the bed. The doctor looked at him. "She'll rest comfortably here," he said softly. "We'll monitor her until morning." Ethan nodded, but his eyes never left her. The team left quietly. The room dimmed to a soft amber glow. Outside the window, dawn was beginning to hint at the sky. Nora slept, and Ethan sat beside her, eyes burning, chest heavy, heart wide open in a way he could no longer deny. He leaned forward, brushing a gentle hand across her hair, and only when he was sure she was truly safe, truly deeply asleep, did he whisper, "No one will hurt you again. Not the shelter, not the men, not the system, not the past. No one." The ending that was not an end. The house was silent. The world still dark, the child finally breathing without fear. But Ethan knew this wasn't over. Not even close. Someone wanted her back. Someone was willing to break laws to get her. Willing to stalk a hospital. Willing to send men carrying a bag meant to steal her away. And now she was with him. Protected. Sheltered. Hidden. And unavoidably connected. Ethan sat there beside her, brushing his thumb gently over her unbandaged hand. Not an ending. A beginning. A dangerous one. A tender one. A necessary one. He watched her sleep until the first rays of dawn touched the windows. Then, with a voice that barely carried beyond the space between them, he whispered, "We'll face everything together," and meant every word.